Hi, this is Paul Banas with GreatDad.com, and we're here to get today with Julian Redwood, our friend Julian Redwood, who's a family therapist here in San Francisco. And for those of you who did see the title, I think it's a very interesting topic, one that's really interested me for a long time. It's about disempowered fathers. I mean, that's the title, but it's how the relationships change with baby in the picture and how men hold on to this amorphous thing called power in the relationship, or power just for the source of pride and all those things that means. It's in this world that we live in today with a lot of changing roles and the fluidity of what feminine, masculine, all that stuff mean. I think it's a conversation that's even more poignant than ever. Today I want to talk with Julian about a number of the stages that we go through in this journey, from both the pregnancy, the living with a newborn, and what really changes the family dynamic, and then ongoing how this role changes. So say hi, Julian, so everybody can see you.
Hi, Paul. Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I love this conversation and this topic. You know, there's so many fathers that are really struggling with how to be empowered fathers, be active members of their family, and so often feel like second-class parents. And doesn't have to be that way. It can be a wonderful experience where we're really in there and loved and love the experience and don't have to resent the whole thing and go off to work to feel better about ourselves. And so talking about that and empowering dads to have a really wide range of possibilities for themselves, something I really love.
Yeah, we're going to get into it, but I also, it is it's an important topic, and some people may feel a little bit embarrassed even wanting to tune into this subject because of it. I know the whole idea of who wears the pants in the family, who has the power in the relationship. You know, you don't have to look at it that way. And maybe we should start off right from there, is that couples, have all kinds of different ways that they relate to each other situationally, times in the marriage and everything. It doesn't necessarily always mean that one's the weak one and one's the strong one.
Definitely. And I think ideally both people are strong and both people feel empowered in the situation. I'm definitely not advocating for any kind of return to a situation where the man had more of the power. But unfortunately, we fall into this situation where we don't know our roles often and we get lost in that. And so how do we each inhabit a really powerful role where we can both get our needs met, both with our children and with each other, and not fall into a kind of lost zone of who to be. But being powerful is something that has a lot of shame around it in our society. You know, primarily men, misuse their power and continue to misuse their power in a lot of situations. And so the movement to equalize that's happened over the last 50 plus years has been a wonderful effect for everybody, and caused us, unfortunately, though, to really question, what does it mean? And is it okay to be powerful? Is it okay to be assertive? And is it okay to really get in there with their own ideas? We're so scared, most of us, a lot of us, myself included, of kind of inhabiting our strength, wielding a sword, saying how we think it should be, that we shy away and we kind of hide and we hand over too much power.
Well, let's make sure, though, also there's the flip side of that is the fear of being powerless too, because I think that's both. There's a shame associated maybe with being using your power too much and being the person who takes advantage of your marriage and your spouse and everything, or the ones who feel shame that they are letting their wife take all the control, even though they may not even feel that that's the way the relationship is. They worry about the perception of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually really much more common now, unfortunately, because of what our past 50 plus years has given us, that we often feel like, oh my God, I'm just a weak guy in my house. I'm not being the man. I'm not being the dad. I'm not, how do I do this? And going and being around friends, and then our friends see the wife being the one in power, and we're kind of like, oh, what do I do? And the shame that comes up around that. It can be a real bumbling situation that we don't want to be weak and we don't want to be too powerful,
So let's talk a little bit about how some of these conditions, I mean, we're really talking about fatherhood now. So the part of the relationship that's, has been going on for 2 or 3 years before you have baby aside. I think a lot of this is set during pregnancy, where new dads really have the opportunity to either be involved or not be involved, and it kind of sets a stage for later on who's going to be, is it going to be an equal partnership in terms of who changed the diapers, who runs out and buys a stroller, but then later on it carries through all these other different choices, like who chooses what sports they do, what language they take, what school they go to, a whole host of different things. So let's talk about pregnancy first and what happens in that changing dynamic that you see in the family.
I think you nailed it there, Paul, that I think that is the moment where we have the potential for having it go down a much better path, where each person is empowered and engaged in the situation. And all too often, women, for a variety of reasons, one is the societal conditioning. It seems like there's some about it that's just how we're wired. And also just what we feel as men is our role as part of that societal conditioning. We're not really sure what our role is. So the women get in there and they start researching diapers, and they start making the birth plan, and they start figuring out how to deal with the kid when it first comes out. And if we stand back in that and hand it over to them, because they're often more excited about it, not always, but often more excited about it, more engaged, more inclined to read self-help books or books on parenting, they start to get more and more empowered. We stand back, and that's where that dynamic really gets cemented. It really cemented, but it starts off in that place. And if we can make some active effort at that point to be like, no, I want this to be a collaborative experience. I'm going to take on these areas where I'm the one that really knows, and we could collaborate together, then it ends up being a collaborative relationship and parenting experience that much further down the line. The sooner you can get in there and make it equal, the less you have to compensate. If you're coming in even a couple of weeks after the kid's born, the mom's already really far ahead at that point, and you're having to play catch up. It's totally doable. I help men do it all the time, but it does require more effort because they already feel that much more confident. We're already that much more kind of lost in our questioning and what we should or shouldn't do, more inclined to just hand the baby off to the mom anytime it cries or has a problem. And there's more patterning that we have to compensate for. So yeah, like you said, pregnancy is the place to make that choice to get in there.
Yeah, I don't know if it has to be set up like that. It's a race or some sort of competition. But your point is really important about the fact that the way we show interest and we get involved, and this is true through everything in life, not just parenting, but perhaps parenting is is one of those things that's so involving, especially in the couple. But if you're planning a trip together, I mean, if you don't get involved and don't choose the sites to see and the museums you want to go to or whatever, it's going to look like you're just along for the ride. And if you're okay with that in your life and just being along with the ride, that's one thing. But if you don't want to feel this loss of power in the pregnancy and in the parenting later on, you and I come from a point of view of really the importance of parenting and how central that is to our life, our adult life. So that's one thing that has to be said. But if you don't want to be lost in that, you do have to take this really active role, starting as you say with pregnancy. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to become an OBGYN, but there are so many areas that you can have an opinion on.
Definitely. I mean, for me, it was, the baby carrier and the diapers, those kind of things where it's like, it's just more mechanical devices, which is the best mechanical device, searching online. It's just like looking up which skill saw to buy or something like that. It's the same kind of research and engages the same part of the brain. And when not all about a race, but about a collaboration in a way that can really lead to a wonderful experience. And yeah, you're right that both of us really value parenting. We have had the experience of being amazingly rewarding. And it really brings to mind for me one of the big problems that so many of us men don't know that it can be an amazingly rewarding experience from day one. There's so much idea that like, oh, once they can talk or once they can walk, then you'll get it. It'll be something you really value, but just leave it to the mom at the first part. And so there is a kind of inclination that, no, that we don't nurture. That's not what we do. Women do that. Give that over to the women. And that's where this wonderful experience gets missed. The first time my wife had to leave me with the baby, she had she used to be a midwife, and she went off to be with a client overnight, and I had to have the baby in my arms the whole night, and I was scared about it. But to wake up the next morning and for us to smile with one another and realize I could provide for that baby was an amazing experience. That had I gone the normal route, just being like, oh, I don't think so, I can't do that, I don't, and stood back in my insecurity, I would have lost that amazing opportunity to realize, oh my God, this is my baby, and I can provide everything it needs, everything. There's no need. Yeah, wonderful that there's two parents, but I can do it if I need to. And that's a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
So let's talk a little bit about that newborn stage. Maybe this even is set up even in pregnancy, when there are these other voices in your world who are saying, Julian, stay out of the room, or decorating the nursery, that's not your domain. Just don't be a pain about this. All these different things, but it really comes to a head when they decide who's going to be in the delivery room and beyond. If the people in your life are saying, back off, you don't know how to change a diaper. Oh, Julian, you're crazy. You thought that if you even changing a diaper or washing a bottle, that's just laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
What do you see in your discussions about how people take on that role and fight those prejudices, really?
Yeah. It's a great point. And the most painful one that I hear is when guys have the kid out on their own and somebody comes along and says, oh, you're babysitting today, huh? As though it's, you don't babysit your own baby, and the idea if the man has the child, he must be doing a special thing. And it's so disempowering to hear that, it's so like deflating to be like, wow, the woman has all these people supporting her, she needs anything. There's nursing, whatever. There's tons of help available for them. Walking down the street, people are constantly giving her advice about how to do it. And then we're kind of left to the side, the nurses or the doctors talking to our wives about what the baby needs and not engaging us. How do we have to insert ourselves over and over again actively in order to not fall down, really? And this is where I think we can follow the women's role really well when they inserted themselves into the workforce increasingly over the last many decades. They had to, in the face of a lot of people, men primarily, saying they can't do it, they shouldn't bother, this isn't their place. They had to keep standing up. They had to keep supporting themselves. They, clan together to do that. And I think that's a big piece, is us as fathers supporting one on this wave of fatherhood that are really engaged, wonderful fathers. Hearing that we can do it, getting righteous about that. No, there's no inequality here. We can all do this. Is a wonderful feeling and empowering to feel that, like, kind of righteous.
Yeah, and I know for us, one of the major events was the choice of a doula. Up until that point, certainly my wife she'd been reading the book, she'd been doing a lot of the studyings. I had picked up Armin Brott's Expectant Father, so I'd done a little bit of reading, but for the most part, I was a visitor in the OBGYN office, and I was supportive, but I wasn't living it in the same 24/7 way she was.
Yep.
But when we went to choose the doula, that's when it really became real to me that there was going to be this other person in the delivery room. Yeah. And I was adamant that person wasn't going to be, the sister in motherhood, excluding me from the process. And we were lucky that we found a doula who that was her viewpoint right from the beginning. And I loved her immediately, is that she wanted to be there to be a help to me and my wife, but she was going to only be there for as much of her as we wanted. So she was really clear about, like, all you have to do is tell me to back off, or you want private time or whatever, and I'll leave, versus somebody else, mother-in-law, sister, all these other people who may be setting that whole tone of disempowering the dad right from the delivery experience.
Yes. No, when that kind of person is involved, who's saying, what are you doing here? This is the woman's role. That's a really hard to stand up to, particularly if it is our mother-in-law or somebody like that, where we feel, whoa, how can I talk to you directly about what's happening here? So we just, our child is on the line. They have shown that kids that have an engaged father during pregnancy end up being more successful in life, end up getting better grades, making more money, being happier, less likely to use drugs, all of it, all because the dad who engages during pregnancy. And that, if that means us having to kind of force ourselves in there and say, look, no, actually things have changed, and I need to be in there. I really, Get some support if you need for some other dads, and go in and face that. It's a hard thing to do, but it's crucial for your child's sake and your relationship's sake. So many relationships fail because all of the burden ends up get put on the mom. She's overwhelmed, overtaxed, doing too much of the nurturing. She has no availability for us as a result of that. She starts nagging us because she feels so burdened and overwhelmed by the situation. Nobody likes getting nagged, right? So we back off further, which causes the relationship to really deteriorate. She starts hanging out with the kids to get her emotional needs met, which isn't good for the kids. And so often it ends up in divorce in that first year or three. And so our kids' happiness, our relationships, everything rides on us getting involved during that pregnancy. Well, not that it can't be done later, but it's just the easiest spot to get in there, at the onset.
I don't think this necessarily has to be a power play where you go to the mother-in-law or whoever it is and say, hey, get butt out. But I think the point you're making is really important is in how you communicate this to your spouse about how important it is to you that this gets off on the right foot. And I never had a real long debate with my wife about this, so maybe I don't know how difficult this could be. But for us, the conversation was always around, this is the start of our family together and a start of a whole new chapter in our relationship, our family together. And I wanted it to be a private thing, mostly between the two of us, because it was so, primal in its essence. And I think if you come about it from kind of that point of view, is that this isn't just, I want to be there as a sideshow, that it's, for you, it's symbolic. You may, that might work better. And everybody's going to have to work this out for themselves, clearly, but.
Totally. No, I think you hit on it really well there. That it's really the place that we have to start is with our partners, and going to our partners and saying, hey, I really want to be involved in here. And can you help me? Because I don't have as much a voice in the world, when it comes to these things, include me, empower me. We need the help from the woman who tends to have all the power, just like they needed us to kind of step down a little bit when it came to stepping into the workforce. They need to kind of give us some space and support us to step up in that situation. And not from a power play at all, just from a collaboration, like, let's get this team working really well. And most women at that point are like, oh my God, you want to be involved? That sounds awesome. I love that idea. It's harder later on when the woman already is running 90% of the show and we try to insert ourselves and we have our own ideas about how it should be different. And then they're like, no, you're doing it wrong. And then it ends up in this fight. But when you start from that place of scratch, and one of the ways I think that's wonderful to do that is to read a book together during pregnancy. Just, a couple nights a week, read a couple pages about raising kids and talk about what you're going to do. What's going to happen when there's no sex? What's going to happen when you're not getting any sleep? Who's going to wake up at night? Who's going to do X, Y, and Z? If you can read a book together and discuss it, it creates that sense of collaboration. If you just leave the woman to read all the books, and it gets this imbalance where she has all the ideas and we don't have so much. Even if we have researched the carrier and other things, the real nitty gritty of what does it mean to raise a kid needs to be ideally needs to be a collaborative conversation. So it's done as a team.
Yeah, communication is so important. We'll get off on that tangent. We'll cover that another time. But let's talk about what happens then, some of the real nitty gritty of what happens during that newborn time when the new rules are set. I mean, we did a hangout a couple of weeks ago about the change of the sex life and how big a factor that is in the relationship. Yeah. But especially the way the man is, for those first 6 weeks, is quite often, making food, running errands, doing a lot of stuff that's a lot more menial, and it's harder for him to bond with the baby, feels a little bit outside the picture, can't breastfeed. All these things. How do you think the dad should stay involved in this picture, or maybe it's just a simple fact of being aware of how this 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, whatever it is, and being patient to last through it?
Well, I actually think it should be an active effort on the dad's part to insert himself into the situation. And whenever the kid doesn't need to eat, get in there. Kick the mom out, have her go do what she can do for half an hour, whatever the time window that you have where there's not a need for nursing. Take your shirt off and feel the baby on your skin. we have to actively make space to bond and fall in love with our babies. Moms get it because they're nursing most of the time, and they sit there and they stare into its eyes, and it's an amazing experience for them. We have to make that effort. Just sit there with your baby on you, look into its eyes, reflect. I mean, if it goes goo goo gaga, you go goo goo gaga. Make the same facial expressions. Do these things that are actually been shown to be completely necessary for the wiring of the brain. That kind of mirroring, looking right into the eyes, reflecting the expressions that are happening really, really is crucial to brain development. And we can do that just as much as the moms. And all we have to do is get in there when there's not a need for nursing. And ideally, even it's a place where the mom's not there, so we're not having to listen to her ideas about it. And we can feel a little bit more like, okay, let me stumble my way through this. I mean, I remember those moments of, oh my God, what do I do with the head? Its head falls off and it's going to roll on the ground if I don't do what, but it doesn't, and you just be careful and you realize your way. And I'm all for actively inserting ourselves and not having to just be patient. And when it comes to the bonding part, I think it makes a huge difference to really get in there. We're talking about 10 minutes 3 times a day would be fantastic, right? We're not talking about hours and hours necessarily. For sure, an hour once a day is great. Whatever we can do realistically. But they've shown that dads that have longer paternity leaves and therefore are around more and therefore actually create bonding with the child, immense long-term difference in terms of the happiness of the child and the family.
Yeah, but one tip that I'd give that I thought both serves as a way to create those kind of real memories. We all talk about like living in the moment and trying to really experience these things. Is for me, it was having a whole series of different firsts, that I was the first to do these different things. I know for my daughter, first time getting her brother to laugh was a big thing, and she remembers that forever. But for me, with the baby, I was the first to change a diaper. So I'd always have that claim to fame, no matter what. Nobody had that one on me.
Yeah.
And I was probably the first one to put him in a baby carrier and carry him outside. And those moments, if you can grab a hold of them and own them, are real sources of pride. And I think they really do show you're in there as a dad.
Yeah, totally. That's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I loved how I used to strap my daughter onto me and go for walks at night, zip up my jacket on top of her and walk through the neighborhood. It was just amazing moments. And I think claiming that, so I'm going to do this, it gives us a way to actually kind of have a goal, a clarity of what our role is, and then doing it. I'm going to be the first to do that. I'm going to go do that. And then we're empowered to do it, right? From then on out, changing diapers is a piece of cake. The mom doesn't have a leg up on us there when we can both do it.
Right. You're still going to face a lot of those stereotypes. I mean, obviously the world is changing a lot, but there's still a lot of those stereotypes out there. The other one, and getting into our last chapter here in terms of the ongoing, is I've heard men, especially in situations where it's a stay-at-home dad, they're often referred to as the mom.
Yeah.
And that's not always it's not always used in the most positive of senses. I think back 20 years ago, it was that Mr. Mom, bumbling dad, didn't have any clue as to what he's doing. But now it's more like a feminized mom, lack of power, can't do anything, so he's staying at home with the kid, which has got to be one of the most negative, things that we put onto this father idea that I've come across.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that the idea that it's less than to be the dad that's really engaged, or even the one that's primarily engaged providing for the kid, is such a shame, because, I mean, as moms know, it is really, really hard to be that primary provider. It's a lot harder to do that than go off and do just about any job, in my experience. And I wasn't up for that personally. My wife was up for it, and she wanted to do that. I know for you, Paul, I think you were up for that, and you got in there in a way that I think it's fantastic, and takes so much strength, really, particularly in the face of how it's seen in our society, not as a thing of power and difficulty, but as oh, well, yeah, just because you couldn't make as much money. So, or, well, what's wrong with you? You're why can't you go out and be a man? And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And women face it too, right? There's the idea that you stay at home mom. Oh, well, then what do you do with your life? I hear that from moms all the time. Like, oh, I'm nobody because all I do is stay home with the kids. It's like, oh my God, it's so much harder to do that. than go off and follow some career path.
So what kind of advice do you have for dads in those situations, or have you seen this in your practice where people are working through this and have worked through it successfully? Because I know, talking to other therapists, that it's an issue for both men and women. I mean, there are the men who go off to work and become even more involved with their work, and then start to look down on their wife for doing that mom thing. And the same is true for women and men.
Yeah. I mean, the cleanest, easiest thing is this conversation piece, right? Going and talking to your partner, ideally, about whatever your feelings are about that. If you have, your partner supporting you and being like, no, I see what you're doing. This is wonderful. I really love how you're being the stay-at-home dad. That feeling like the number one person in your life has your back makes an immense difference. Having a community that supports you, getting either online or a local stay-at-home dad group or dad groups that happen, getting involved in that where you're just around other dads that are doing it, where you can counter those voices that are really deeply implanted in our society. That's not the dad's role. Fortunately, there's tribes out there of where the men are the primary providers. This isn't like a deeply wired thing that we have to go out there and hunt the lions and the women take care of the kid. No, it's actually, we see, native tribes where the men are the ones providing the love. And you often see, when guys are at the park with their kids, they're really getting engaged and playing with their kids. And the moms can tend to be more kind of sit back and look on their iPhone. And it's obviously a stereotype, but there's a way in which we can be fantastic fathers, but we need the support. We need to have our partner and other men really engaged and believing in what we're doing, because we're going to run into those voices where like, what are you doing? Were you the babysitter today? All those painful things.
Right. Well, I think we're running into the end of our time, but this has really been an interesting conversation. And I think we'll probably come back and revisit. There are several points in here that I think could go a lot more in depth.
Definitely.
But for me at GreatDad.com, this is Paul Banas. I've got Julian Redwood here from Frontal Fatherhood.com. And I really urge you to check out some of his really good videos that attack a lot of different relationship issues, not just for fathers, but for the couple in this changing world that is parenting. Any last thoughts, Julian?
Just thank you so much for having me, Paul. I really appreciate this conversation, and I just hope that more and more of a men have it, so we can really get to a place where it's seen that it's really easy and accepted that we're engaged fathers. And it was wonderful to see in the Super Bowl ads last time around that there were, I think, 5 different ads that showed us just being that awesome dad. So things are changing, and I don't think we're very far from what we're talking about being a widespread reality.
Okay, thanks. Until next time.
Yeah, take care, Paul.